So biomass energy is actually the first energy source that humans used because it includes the burning of wood for heat, for creating fire, for cooking. That would be biomass energy. So when you look at this, bio means living, so organic molecules, and mass means taking carbon out of the atmosphere and putting it into organic molecules. So this would be related to primary productivity. And when we also think about this, we need to not just think about land plants. We can think about aquatic photosynthetic organisms like algae. We could also think about those products that after we use them, like say, for example, the waste products from a mill, or maybe when we're talking about agricultural products, like what is the waste product from a field? Or we could even talk about how this relates to animals. So animals produce waste products like manure, and maybe that manure could be used as a form of energy. So when we look at the distribution of this form of energy, it is very equitable, meaning that it is generally accessible by all people in all countries. So it is more equitable, so we'll put that, it is more equitable than fossil fuels. And why is that? That is because fossil fuels are found in certain regions on the planet of more abundance, and it has actually made countries very, very wealthy, some countries very wealthy. So for example, Saudi Arabia is a country that is wealthy because of the oil reserves that it sits upon. It is also renewable as long as we don't use it up too quickly, right? So we say that fossil fuels take way too long to form, and millions of years they've been underground. And so it's not something that's renewable within our lifetime, but we could actually grow, say, for example, a crop of corn, and then we could use that corn to produce ethanol, and ethanol is a source of energy. We could also grow, say, for example, a field of poplars. So fast-growing trees, for example, we could grow them to produce energy. So one of the problems, however, is it does release carbon dioxide. And carbon dioxide is, as you know, a greenhouse gas. And so we do have that issue with the biomass energy. When we talk about the sources of biomass energy and what we do with the organic molecules, we can say that we can break it down, for example, using acids and enzymes. We can also actually turn it into a gas. So you could take manure, for example, you could extract methane, but you could digest it in a digester and manure and produce a gas that you could use to cook. Now, in the past, people used manure to cook, maybe even on an open fire, right? But that actually is not very efficient, and it produces some toxic chemicals. And so in those parts of the world that are dependent upon biofuels, it's important that you have cooking stoves, for example, that are very efficient and are not constantly releasing gases that could make the people that are using them ill. So in those developing countries, oftentimes biomass energy is their primary form of energy. It could be where they get 80 to 90% of their energy use is this biomass. So we could break it down with bacteria. We could heat it up and produce steam and generate electricity with it, right? So there's all different ways that we could use this biomass energy. So I specifically want to talk about ethanol because you see this, or you probably see this every time you go and you fill up your gas tank. Because ethanol is, in our country, derived from corn, and it is added to gas. Ethanol releases less CO2 than gasoline. So it releases less CO2 than gasoline. And so it makes your car more efficient. And there are some cars that run on they're called flexible fuel vehicles, and they can actually run on a mixture of gas and up to 85% ethanol. And so that would be something that you might be interested in, like thinking about if you were going to buy a new car, if it's a flexible fuel and could use more ethanol than gasoline. So the problem with this is that the corn is an intensive crop to produce. So when we talk about this, we have to look at the whole system, the whole perspective, and we have to look at the externalities. So we say ethanol is great, but if you think about the amount of water it takes to raise that corn, right, to grow the corn, the amount of fossil fuels that might be burnt in that process of agriculture, of creating that, and then transporting the ethanol, there's always those things to take into consideration when you're considering whether or not this is a sustainable practice. And so it tends to be very controversial because it is, at least for people that are in thinking about these ideas of sustainability, because it is very intensive. It takes lots of water and lots of fossil fuels to produce. And so biomass energy, you could compare it to solar energy. You could also compare it to wind energy. And again, both of those also have externalities involved in them, in the production, right? And maybe even the disposal. So photovoltaic cells, for example, do they have a lifetime? Do we have to dispose of them? Do they use other things that might be something that we would have to mine out of the planet? So there's always things to think about and pay attention to when you're making these comparisons.